Kang Dojin sat alone in the cold prison cell and counted the stones on the wall for the 100th time. There were exactly 847 stones, and he knew every crack and every shadow on each one of them. 6 months in this dark place had given him nothing else to do. The former royal physician pulled his thin blanket tighter around his shoulders as the winter wind crept through the small window above his head. He was only 34 years old, but the past months had aged him greatly. His black hair now showed streaks of gray, and his hands that once healed the sick now trembled from the cold and hunger. He heard footsteps approaching his cell, the heavy boots of soldiers echoing against the stone floor. Dojin did not look up when the iron door creaked open. He already knew who was by the rhythm of the steps. "Physician Kang," said Guard Captain Shin Taiwu in his deep voice. "I bring news from the royal court." Dojin finally raised his eyes to meet the captain's gaze. Shin Taiwu was a large man with a stern face and a scar running across his left cheek. He'd been a soldier for 20 years and had seen much death, yet something in his eyes looked troubled today. "They have set my execution date," Dojin said calmly. "Is that the news you bring?" Captain Shin nodded slowly. 3 days from now, at sunrise. The Queen herself has signed the order." Dojin closed his eyes and took a deep breath. 3 days. He had 3 more sunrises left in this world. The knowledge should have terrified him, but instead he felt only a heavy sadness settling in his chest. "I have one request," Dojin said quietly. "Just one thing before I die." The captain crossed his arms. "Prisoners do not make requests." "Please," Dojin continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I wish to see my wife one final time. Just one glimpse of her face before they take my life." Captain Shin's expression darkened immediately. "Your wife is not human. She is a vampire, a creature of darkness. That is why you are here, physician. You married a monster." "She is not a monster." Dojin's voice rose with sudden emotion. "She is kind and gentle. She has never harmed any innocent person. I love her with all my heart, and I will die loving her." The captain shook his head. "You speak madness. Vampires are demons who drink human blood. They have no souls, no feelings. The kingdom is right to hunt them." Dojin stood up slowly, his chains rattling against the cold floor. "Do you remember 5 years ago, Captain? Your daughter was dying from the plague. Every doctor in the kingdom had given up hope. But I came to your home in the middle of the night and stayed by her bedside for 3 days." Captain Shin's face changed at these words. His stern expression cracked, revealing the worry of a father who still remembered those terrible days. "Your daughter lived because I refused to let her die," Dojin continued. "I asked for nothing in return. But now I am asking you for this one thing. Help me see my wife before I die. I beg you." The captain stood silent for a long moment. Dojin could see the battle happening inside the man's mind. Duty fought against gratitude. Hatred fought against honor. "Even if I wanted to help," Shin said finally, "how would I find a vampire? They hide in the shadows and trust no human." "There are ways," Dojin replied. "The underground network of merchants who trade between our world and theirs. Send word through them. Tell her that her husband awaits death and wishes to see her one last time. She will come. I know she will." Captain Shin turned away, unable to meet Dojin's desperate eyes. "What you ask could cost me everything. My position, my honor, perhaps even my life." "And yet you still have your daughter," Dojin said softly. "She is married now, is she not? Perhaps she has given you grandchildren. All those future moments exist because I chose to help when no one else would." The silence stretched between them like a living thing. Dojin held his breath, knowing that his entire remaining life depended on this one man's decision. Finally, Captain Shin spoke without turning around. I will send word tonight. But if she does not come in 2 days, there's nothing more I can do. And we never had this conversation. Before Dojin could thank him, the captain walked out and slammed the heavy door behind him. The sound echoed through the empty corridor like thunder. Dojin sank back down onto his cold bed and let out a shaky breath. He allowed himself to remember how he had first met Seo Mai-rei, his beautiful vampire wife. It had been a rainy autumn night 2 years ago. Someone had knocked frantically on the back door of his small clinic outside the palace. When he opened it, he found a young woman collapsed on his doorstep, blood pouring from a deep wound in her side. He had carried her inside and laid her on his examination table. As he worked to stop the bleeding, he noticed things that were not normal. Her skin was too pale, too cold. Her heartbeat was slow, almost undetectable. And when she finally opened her eyes in pain, he saw that they glowed with an unnatural silver light. He knew immediately what she was. Every child in the kingdom grew up hearing stories about vampires. They were creatures of evil, enemies of humanity, monsters to be feared and destroyed. But Dojin was a healer. His hands had learned to save lives, not take them. So instead of calling the soldiers, he continued to treat her wounds. He worked through the night until finally, just before dawn, she was stable. She had looked at him with those silver eyes full of confusion and asked, "Why did you help me?" "You know what I am. I am a physician," he had answered simply. "I help those who are suffering. It does not matter what they are." That moment had changed both their lives forever. In the months that followed, Mai-rei returned to see him again and again. What started as gratitude slowly grew into friendship, and friendship eventually blossomed into love. They married in secret under the cherry blossom trees on a spring night when the moon was full. There was no priest, no witnesses, no family. Just two souls promising to love each other despite everything that stood between them. Now Dojin looked up at that same moon through his tiny prison window. It was not full tonight, just a thin crescent hanging in the dark sky. But he knew that somewhere out there, Mai-rei might be looking at the same moon. "Please come to me, my love," he whispered into the darkness. "Let me see your face one more time before I leave this world. That is all I ask." The cold wind answered with silence, and Dojin wrapped his arms around himself and waited for news that might never come. 3 days. He had only 3 days left to hope. Deep in the mountains where no human dared to travel, the vampire sanctuary stood hidden behind ancient waterfalls and thick forests. The cave stretched for miles underground, lit by glowing crystals that the vampires had cultivated for centuries. This was the last safe place for their kind in all the kingdom. Seo Mai-rei sat by the underground river, watching the dark water flow past her feet. She had not eaten in days, and her once bright silver eyes had grown dim with worry. Every night she dreamed of Dojin, and every morning she woke with tears on her face. "Mai-rei," a voice called from behind her. "A messenger has come from the human world." Mai-rei jumped to her feet immediately. Her heart, which beat only 10 times per minute, suddenly raced faster. She ran through the winding tunnels until she reached the main chamber where her fellow vampires had gathered. A young human man stood in the center of the room, surrounded by suspicious vampire guards. He was shaking with fear, his eyes darting around at the pale faces watching him from the shadows. "Speak your message quickly, human," ordered Elder Baek Junho, the leader of the Vampire Council. He was over 600 years old, with long white hair and eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. "Why have you come to our sacred place?" The messenger's voice trembled as he spoke. "I carry word from Guard Captain Shin Tai-woo of the royal prison. He says that the physician Kang Do-jin will be executed in 3 days. The physician has one final wish, to see his wife Seo Mai-rei before he dies. Ray felt her legs go weak beneath her. She grabbed the stone wall to keep herself from falling. Executed. They were going to kill her husband. I will go to him, she declared loudly. I will leave tonight. You will do no such thing. Elder Beak's voice thundered through the chamber. Going to the human capital is suicide. They have vampire hunters everywhere. If you are caught, you will not only die, but you will expose our entire sanctuary. But Dojin is my husband, Ray cried. He has protected our kind for years. How many wounded vampires did he heal in secret? How many of our people owe their lives to him? The other vampires in the chamber began to whisper among themselves. It was true that the human physician had helped many of them. When silver poisoning spread through a group of young vampires last winter, it was Dojin who had found the cure. He asked for nothing in return, only that they keep his involvement secret. Choi Yuna, Marie's closest friend, stepped forward. She was only 80 years old by vampire standards, still young and full of fire. I support Ray. We cannot abandon the man who has done so much for us. That would make us no better than the humans who hunt us. Enough. Elder Beak raised his hand for silence. I understand your feelings, Ray, but I must think of all our people. Over 200 vampires live in this sanctuary. Their safety must come before one human life, no matter how good that human might be. Ray walked slowly toward the elder, her eyes never leaving his face. There is something else you should know, Elder Beak. Something I have told no one until now. She placed her hand on her stomach and took a deep breath. I am carrying Dojin's child. The entire chamber fell into shocked silence. For a long moment, no one moved or spoke. Even the ancient Elder Beak looked completely stunned by this revelation. That is impossible, whispered one of the older vampires. Vampires cannot have children with humans. It has never happened in all our history. And yet it is true, Ray said firmly. I have felt the life growing inside me for 2 months now. This child is real, and their father is sitting in a prison cell waiting to die. Yuna rushed to Marie's side and embraced her. A child. Ray, this is a miracle. This could change everything. Elder Beak slowly rose from his throne of carved stone. He walked toward Ray with careful steps, his ancient eyes studying her with new interest. He placed his cold hand on her stomach and closed his eyes. I can feel it, he said softly. There is indeed a new life within you, a life that is neither fully vampire nor fully human. This has never happened before in 6,000 years of our existence. Which is why I must go to Dojin, Ray pleaded. This child deserves to know their father, even if only for a moment. And Dojin deserves to know that his love created something extraordinary. The elder withdrew his hand and turned to face the council. Brothers and sisters, we stand at a crossroads. This child that Ray carries could be the bridge between our kinds. Or it could bring destruction upon us all. I do not know which path the future holds. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was heavy with resignation. Ray, I will not stop you from going. But understand this clearly. If you are caught, if you expose our location, we will not come to save you. The sanctuary must survive, even if individuals do not. Ray bowed deeply to the elder. I understand and accept these terms. I ask for nothing except your permission to try. You have it, Beak replied. But take care, child. The human capital is filled with those who would destroy you without hesitation. Your kind has been hunted for so long that many humans no longer see us as anything but monsters. Yuna grabbed Marie's arm. I will come with you. You should not face this danger alone. No, Ray said gently. If something happens to me, someone must be here to tell my story. Someone must remember that a vampire loved a human so much that she risked everything for him. Stay here, Yuna. Promise me you will survive and remember." Tears of blood rolled down Yuna's pale cheeks as she nodded. Vampires could not cry normal tears, only the blood that flowed through their ancient veins. "I promise. But you must promise to return. Return with your husband or return alone, but return to us." Mireille embraced her friend one final time before pulling away. She had little time to waste. The sun would set soon, and she had a long journey ahead. She gathered a dark cloak and a small knife made of ordinary steel rather than silver. She could not carry much, for speed would be her greatest weapon. Before she left the sanctuary, she stopped at the entrance and looked back at her home. The glowing crystals cast strange shadows on the cave walls, and she could see her people watching her from the darkness. Some looked worried, others disapproving, but a few nodded with respect. "I go now to find my husband," she announced to all who could hear. "I go to show him that our love was not in vain. Whatever happens, know that I am proud to be one of you." With those words, she stepped out into the fading daylight and began her journey toward the human capital. The sun burned her skin slightly, but she did not care. Pain meant nothing compared to the fire in her heart. She carried two lives with her now, her own and the tiny spark of existence growing inside her. This child would know their father's face. She would make sure of that, even if it cost her everything. The moon rose above the mountains as she ran faster than any human could imagine. Tonight she would cross half the kingdom. Tomorrow she would enter the city. And in 2 days, she would hold her husband once more. Nothing would stop her. Not soldiers, not hunters, not even death itself. Love had made her stronger than she had ever been, and that strength would carry her through the darkness ahead. The capital city slept under a blanket of clouds as Mireille slipped through the shadows like smoke. She had arrived just after midnight, her body exhausted from traveling, but her spirit burning with determination. Every corner could hide a vampire hunter. Every window could shelter watching eyes. She moved through the narrow streets with the grace of a predator, staying close to walls and avoiding the circles of light cast by oil lamps. The city smelled of humans, thousands upon thousands of them packed together in their stone buildings. To a vampire, the scent was overwhelming, but Mireille had learned long ago to control her hunger. Near the prison, she found a small alley where shadows gathered thick and dark. There, waiting nervously in the blackness, stood Captain Shin Tai-Wu. The captain drew his sword the moment he sensed movement. "Who goes there?" "Show yourself." "I am the one you sent for," Mireille said softly, stepping just far enough into the dim light for him to see her pale face. "I am Seo Mireille, wife of Kang Dojin." Captain Shin's hand trembled on his sword. Up close, the vampire woman looked almost human. She was beautiful in a strange and haunting way, with long black hair and eyes that glowed faintly silver. But he could see the unnatural stillness of her body, the way she did not breathe unless she chose to. "I kept my promise to your husband," Shin said gruffly. "But I do this only to repay my debt. After tonight, we are even." "After tonight, we are even." "I understand," Mireille replied. "Take me to him, please. I have traveled so far, and time is running out." The captain led her through a hidden passage that ran beneath the prison walls. It was an old escape route built centuries ago, known only to high-ranking guards. The tunnel was wet and filled with rats, but Mireille did not complain. They emerged inside the prison basement, surrounded by empty cells and rusted chains. Captain Shin guided her up narrow stairs until they reached the corridor where the most dangerous prisoners were kept. "Third door on the left," he whispered. "You have until dawn. When the sun rises, I will come for you. If you are still here, I will have no choice but to arrest you. Do you understand?" Mireille nodded and watched the captain disappear back down the stairs. Then she turned toward the third door, and her heart ached with desperate hope. The door was heavy iron with a small barred window at the top. Through it, she could see a figure huddled on a thin mattress, wrapped in a blanket that provided little warmth. Even in the darkness, she knew that shape. She would know it anywhere. "Dojin," she whispered through the bars. The figure stirred immediately. Dojin sat up and turned toward the door, his eyes widening with disbelief. "Myray, is that really you?" "It is me, my love. I am here." Dojin rushed to the door and pressed his hands against the cold iron. Myray did the same from her side, their fingers almost touching through the bars. Both of them were crying now, Dojin with normal tears and Myray with drops of blood that stained her pale cheeks. "You should not have come," Dojin said, his voice breaking. "It is too dangerous. If they catch you—" "I do not care about danger." Myray interrupted him. "You are my husband. I love you more than I love my own life. How could I let you die without seeing your face one more time?" Dojin reached through the bars and gently wiped the bloody tears from her cheek. "I have missed you every moment of every day. Even in this terrible place, thinking of you gave me strength." Myray captured his hand and pressed it against her face, savoring the warmth of his human skin. "There is something I must tell you, Dojin. Something wonderful." "What is it?" She took his hand and placed it on her stomach through the iron bars. "I am carrying your child. Our child. A miracle that should not be possible, but it is real." Dojin's entire body went still. His eyes moved from her face to her stomach and back again. "A child? We are having a child?" "Yes." Myray smiled through her tears. "I felt the life inside me 2 months ago. Our love created something that has never existed before. A being that is both human and vampire." Dojin collapsed against the door, overwhelmed by emotion. Joy and grief crashed together inside him like waves during a storm. He was going to be a father, but he would never live to see his child born. "This is the greatest gift you could have given me," he whispered. "To know that a part of me will live on, to know that our love will continue through this child. I can die peacefully now." "No," Myray said fiercely. "You will not die. I will find a way to save you. I will fight every guard in this prison if I must. You cannot fight an entire kingdom, my love. And you must not try. Think of our child. They need their mother to survive. Promise me, Myray. Promise me that you will escape before dawn and raise our child in safety." Before Myray could answer, a sound echoed through the corridor. Footsteps, many of them, coming from below. Voices shouted orders, and armor clanked against stone. Dojin's face went pale with fear. "They know you are here. Someone must have seen you enter the city." In the royal palace at that same moment, Advisor Park Min-ho smiled wickedly as his spy delivered the news. Park was a thin man with cruel eyes and ambition that knew no limits. He had orchestrated Dojin's downfall months ago, using the physician's secret marriage as a weapon to remove a political rival. "A vampire has entered the prison?" Park asked with satisfaction. "This is perfect. Capture her alive. We will execute them both together. The people will love it." Young Prince Seo-kun stood in the shadows nearby, listening to every word. He was only 25 years old, but already troubled by the cruelty he witnessed at court. As a child, the physician Dojin had saved his life during a terrible fever. The prince had never forgotten that kindness. Now he watched Advisor Park send soldiers to capture an innocent woman, and something inside him rebelled. But what could he do? He was just a prince, and Park controlled the royal guard. Back in the prison, Myray heard the soldiers approaching. She pulled desperately at the iron door, but even her vampire strength could not break the ancient lock. "Go now," Dojin begged her. "Use the tunnel. Save yourself and our baby. I will not leave you," Myray cried. You must. Dojin reached through the bars and grabbed her face, forcing her to look into his eyes. I love you. I love our child. And I command you to live. Do you hear me? Live for our family. The soldiers appeared at the end of the corridor, their torches casting wild shadows on the walls. They carried silver weapons that would burn vampire flesh on contact. Dojin looked at the alarm bell hanging near his cell. He had one chance to save his wife and child, just one. Without hesitation, he grabbed the rope and pulled with all his remaining strength. The bell rang out across the prison. It was the signal for all guards to secure their positions, which meant closing and locking all tunnels and passages. The escape route. Maya realized with horror. If they lock it. Run! Dojin screamed. Run now! I am doing this because I love you. Do not let my sacrifice be meaningless. The soldiers charged forward. Myra looked at her husband one last time, burning his face into her memory. Then she turned and ran faster than she had ever run before. Behind her, she could hear Dojin fighting the soldiers, buying her precious seconds with his own body. She could hear him cry out in pain as they beat him down, but still he fought. She found the tunnel entrance just as a guard was preparing to seal it. She crashed into him with her full vampire strength, sending him flying against the wall. Then she dove into the darkness below. Behind her, the iron gates slammed shut, and she heard the locks clicking into place. She was trapped in the tunnel, but at least she was not in the prison. At least she was still alive. She ran through the darkness, water splashing beneath her feet, rats scattering before her. Her heart felt like it was being torn apart. She had left him. She had left the man she loved more than anything. When she finally emerged outside the city walls, dawn was approaching. The eastern sky was turning pink, and already her skin began to sting from the coming sun. She found shelter in an abandoned barn and collapsed into the hay. There, surrounded by the smell of old animals and rotting wood, she wept until no more bloody tears would come. She had seen her husband. She had told him about their child. But now everything was worse than before. Now they would both be hunted. And yet, even in her despair, a tiny spark of hope remained. Dojin was still alive. As long as he breathed, there was still a chance to save him. She just needed a plan, a miracle, or perhaps both. The royal court was packed with nobles, merchants, and common folk who had heard the exciting news. A vampire had been captured in the capital city, and now both the creature and her human lover would face trial before the queen herself. It was the greatest spectacle anyone could remember. Myra stood in heavy silver chains that burned her wrists and ankles. Each movement sent waves of pain through her body, but she refused to show weakness. She kept her head high and her silver eyes fixed forward as the crowd shouted insults and threw rotten vegetables at her. Dojin stood beside her in iron chains, his face bruised and swollen from the beating he had received. But when he looked at Myra, his eyes still held nothing but love and admiration. Even now, facing death together, he thought only of her safety. Advisor Park Minho stood before the throne, reading the charges in a loud, theatrical voice. The accused, Kang Dojin, is guilty of treason against the kingdom. He secretly aided vampires, healed their wounded, and worst of all, married one of these unholy creatures. The punishment for such crimes is death by burning. The crowd roared with approval. Many people in the kingdom had lost family members to vampire attacks over the centuries. Their hatred ran deep and hot. And this vampire, Park continued, pointing at Myra with disgust, invaded our sacred capital city. She used dark magic to infiltrate our prison. She must be destroyed along with her human puppet. Queen Yilma sat on her golden throne, watching the proceedings with an unreadable expression. She was 80 years old, with white hair and skin like ancient paper. She had ruled for 40 years, and in that time, she had ordered the deaths of hundreds of vampires. Yet today, something troubled her. Prince Seokun pushed through the crowd and stepped forward. "I request permission to speak, Your Majesty." Advisor Park's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "The prince has no role in this trial. He should remain silent." "Let him speak," the queen said quietly. Her voice was soft but carried absolute authority. Prince Seokun bowed to his grandmother and then turned to face the crowd. "Many of you know the physician Kang Dojin as a traitor, but I know him as the man who saved my life when I was a child." Whispers spread through the court. The nobles exchanged shocked glances. 20 years ago, I was dying from a fever that no doctor could cure," the prince continued. "My parents had given up hope, but Dojin stayed by my bed for 7 days and 7 nights until the fever broke. I am alive today because of him. That changes nothing." Park shouted. "The man still betrayed his kingdom by consorting with vampires." "Did he?" Seokun asked calmly. "Or did he simply choose to help those who were suffering, regardless of what they were? Is that not what healers are supposed to do?" Dojin finally spoke, his voice rough but strong. "Your Highness speaks the truth. I am a physician. I took an oath to preserve life, not to judge who deserves to live. When wounded vampires came to me, I saw only patients in pain. Was I supposed to let them die when I had the power to help?" "Yes," screamed someone in the crowd. "They are monsters." "Are they?" Dojin turned to face the angry crowd. "I have treated vampires and humans alike. I have seen cruelty in both. I have seen kindness in both. If loving someone from the other side makes me a traitor, then I accept that title proudly." Advisor Park laughed coldly. Beautiful words from a condemned man. But words cannot change the law. Vampires are enemies of humanity. Anyone who aids them is a traitor. Myre stepped forward as far as her chains would allow. The crowd gasped and stepped back, fear written on their faces. "May I speak?" she asked, her voice clear and musical. "I know you all hate me. I know you see me as a monster. But I want you to understand something. Why should we listen to a demon?" Someone shouted. "Because I was human once," Myri replied. 200 years ago, I was born in a village not far from here. I had parents who loved me, brothers and sisters who played with me, dreams of growing old and having children of my own. Then a vampire attacked my village, and I was turned against my will. The crowd grew quieter, caught off guard by her words. For the first 50 years, I was indeed a monster. Myre continued. I killed without mercy. I hated what I had become, and I took that hatred out on innocent humans. But slowly, over decades and centuries, I learned to control my hunger. I learned that I could survive without killing. I chose to be more than the creature I was forced to become. She looked at Dojin with eyes full of love. And then I met him. A human who saw me not as a monster, but as a person. He healed my wounds and asked nothing in return. He showed me that kindness still existed in this world. How could I not fall in love with such a man? Pretty stories. Park interrupted. But vampires are incapable of love. They are creatures of darkness. Then explain this. Myre placed her chained hands on her stomach. I carry this man's child inside me. A child that is half human and half vampire. A life that should be impossible but exists because love made it real. The entire court exploded into chaos. Nobles shouted in disbelief. Scholars argued about whether such a thing was possible, and the common folk simply stared in wonder. Queen Yanhua raised her hand for silence. The noise died down immediately. Everyone watched as the ancient queen slowly rose from her throne. You say you carry a child of both kinds? The queen asked, her voice trembling slightly. A being that is neither fully human nor fully vampire? Yes, your majesty. Myray bowed her head. I swear it on whatever honor I have left. The queen walked slowly toward the chained prisoners. Guards moved to stop her, but she waved them away. She stopped in front of Myray and studied her face for a long moment. Child, the queen said quietly, so only Myray and Dojin could hear. I'm going to ask you one question, and you must answer truthfully. Do you truly love this man? Not as a possession, not as a source of blood, but as a woman loves her husband? Myra met the queen's ancient eyes. I have lived 200 years, your majesty. In all that time, I never knew what it meant to truly live. Then I met Dojin, and suddenly every moment became precious. He taught me that I was more than a monster. He gave me hope when I had none. I love him more than I love my own existence. I would die 1,000 deaths if it would keep him safe. The queen studied her for another long moment. Then she turned and walked slowly back to her throne. The entire court held its breath. Advisor Park, the queen said finally. You have presented your case well, but I have questions of my own. Captain Shin, step forward. Guard Captain Shin emerged from the crowd, his face pale with worry. He knew that his secret assistance to Mireille might now be revealed. Captain, is it true that the physician Kang Dojin once saved your daughter's life? Shin bowed deeply. Yes, your majesty. 5 years ago, my daughter was dying from plague. Dojin saved her when all other doctors had failed. And is it also true that he has saved the lives of many others in this kingdom? Nobles and commoners alike. It is true, your majesty. The man is the finest physician I have ever known. Hundreds owe their lives to his skill. The queen nodded slowly. So we have a man who has saved countless lives, and we would execute him for saving a few more? Even if those lives were vampire lives? The law is clear, Park insisted, though sweat was forming on his forehead. Aiding vampires is treason. The law was written by humans, the queen replied, and humans can change it. Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning. I need time to consider what I have heard. As the guards led Mireille and Dojin back to the prison, something had changed. The crowd no longer shouted with pure hatred. Some faces showed confusion, others showed curiosity, and a few even showed something that looked almost like sympathy. Perhaps, just perhaps, hope was not entirely lost. The night before the final judgment, Queen Yeomwa did something she had not done in 40 years. She left her royal chambers alone and walked through the dark corridors of the palace without guards or servants. Her old bones ached with every step, but she had a journey to make. The prison was quiet when she arrived. Captain Shin nearly fainted when he saw the queen standing at the gate, wrapped in a simple cloak like any common woman. Your Majesty, he stammered. What are you doing here? This is dangerous. Open the cells, the queen commanded. I wish to speak with the prisoners in private. And Captain, not a word of this to anyone. Minutes later, Dojin and Mireille stood before the queen in a small room lit by a single candle. Their chains had been removed, but neither thought of escaping. Something in the queen's eyes told them this was not a trap. Sit down, both of you, the queen said softly. What I am about to tell you has been a secret for 60 years. Only I know the truth, and I will carry it to my grave. Dojin and Mireille exchanged confused glances, but sat on the wooden stools provided. When I was 20 years old, I fell in love with a young man named Jinwoo, the queen began. He was handsome and kind, and he made me laugh like no one else. We were to be married in the spring. Her old eyes grew distant with memory. But that winter, he was attacked by bandits in the forest. They left him for dead, and he would have died if not for a stranger who found him. That stranger was a vampire. Mireille's eyes widened in shock. A vampire saved your betrothed? Yes. The queen nodded slowly. The vampire could have killed him and drained his blood. Instead, he carried Jinwoo to safety and tended his wounds through the night. When Jinwoo asked why, the vampire said something I have never forgotten. We are not all monsters, just as you are not all saints. Tears formed in the queen's ancient eyes. Jinwoo became my husband and the king of this land. He died 10 years ago, but I never told him about the vampire. I was too ashamed, too afraid of what people would think. Why are you telling us this? Dojin asked gently. Because I have spent 40 years ordering the deaths of vampires. The queen replied. I told myself it was justice, that I was protecting my people. But deep down, I knew I was wrong. A vampire saved the man I loved, and I repaid that kindness with slaughter. She looked at Myre with something that might have been respect. When I saw you today, when I heard you speak of love and hope, I saw the same nobility that vampires showed my husband. I realized that I have been fighting the wrong enemy all these years. What will you do? Myre asked. The queen sighed heavily. I cannot overturn centuries of law in a single night. The people would riot, and Advisor Park would use it to seize power. But I can offer you something. Life instead of death. How? Dojin leaned forward eagerly. Tomorrow, I will announce that you are both sentenced to permanent exile. You will be banished from this kingdom forever, never to return. It is not freedom, but it is survival. Myre fell to her knees. Your Majesty, I do not have words to thank you. Thank me by raising that child well. The queen replied. Raise them to be a bridge between our worlds. Perhaps one day, when I am long dead and forgotten, vampires and humans will live in peace. That is my hope. The next morning, the execution square was packed with people expecting to witness 2 deaths. Advisor Park stood on the platform, already celebrating his victory in his mind. But when Queen Yeonwoo made her announcement, his face turned purple with rage. The prisoners Kang Dojin and Seo Myre are hereby sentenced to permanent exile. The queen declared. They will leave this kingdom today and never return. Anyone who harms them before they reach the border will answer to me personally. This is outrageous. Park shouted. The law demands death. The law demands justice. Prince Seo-kun stepped forward with a scroll in his hand. And speaking of justice, I have evidence that Advisor Park has been stealing from the royal treasury for years. He orchestrated the physician's arrest to silence a witness to his crimes. Soldiers surrounded the shocked advisor as Seo-kun read out the charges. The crowd that had come to watch an execution instead watched a corrupt official dragged away in chains. Within an hour, Dojin and Myre walked through the city gates as free people. Captain Shin himself escorted them to the border, his debt finally repaid in full. Where will you go? He asked as they prepared to part. Far away, Dojin replied. Somewhere our child can grow up without fear. 5 years passed like leaves falling from autumn trees. In a small village at the edge of a distant kingdom, a humble cottage stood surrounded by wildflowers and fruit trees. Inside, a little girl with warm brown eyes and unusually pale skin played with wooden toys on the floor. Ariam, come help your mother with dinner. Dojin called from the kitchen. Coming, father. The 5-year-old ran to him on small, quick legs. She moved faster than any normal child, a hint of the vampire blood flowing through her veins. Myre stood at the stove, stirring a pot of soup. She had changed in the years since their exile. Sunlight no longer burned her skin, a gift from the mixed blood she shared with her daughter. She could walk in daylight now, could feel the warmth of the sun on her face. A messenger came today, she said to Dojin. From the kingdom. Dojin's hands paused on the vegetables he was chopping. What news? Queen Yeonwoo passed away peacefully in her sleep. Prince Seo-kun is now King Seo-kun. Myre smiled with tears in her eyes. And his first act as king was to end all vampire hunts. He declared that vampires and humans must learn to coexist in peace. Dojin set down his knife and embraced his wife. She did it. The old queen actually changed everything. Not just her, Murray whispered. We did it too. Our love, our child, our story. It gave people hope that peace was possible. A knock at the door interrupted them. Dojin opened it to find an ancient figure standing in the evening light. Elder Beak Junho, leader of the Vampire Council, had come to visit for the first time. Elder. Myray rushed to greet him. What brings you here? The old vampire's eyes were fixed on little Ariam, who watched him with curious innocence. I came to see the miracle child, he said softly. The one who should not exist. He knelt down to Ariam's level and studied her face. She has her father's eyes and her mother's grace. She is beautiful. Thank you, Elder, Dojin said proudly. Beak rose slowly and looked at the small family with wonder. I have lived for 600 years. I have seen empires rise and fall, have watched humans and vampires slaughter each other endlessly. I thought there was no hope for our kinds to ever find peace. He placed his cold hand on Murray's shoulder. But you proved me wrong. This child is proof that love is stronger than hatred, that hope is stronger than fear. She is the future we never dared to dream. That night, the family gathered on the hill behind their cottage to watch the sunset. Dojin held Ariam on his shoulders, while Myray stood beside them, the dying light painting her face in shades of gold and rose. Father? Ariam asked in her small voice. Why did grandmother send us the letter? The one that made mother cry happy tears? Dojin smiled and kissed his daughter's forehead. Because a very brave queen wanted the world to be better. She made mistakes in her life, but at the end, she chose love over hate. Will I be brave like her someday? Myray reached up and took her daughter's tiny hand. You already are, my darling. You are the bravest thing we ever did. As the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, Dojin thought about how his life had changed. He had once been a condemned man in a cold prison cell, wishing for one final glimpse of his vampire wife. He had been ready to die, had accepted his fate with quiet dignity. But then Myray came for him and everything changed. Love had rewritten their destiny, had created new life from impossible circumstances, had softened the heart of an old queen, and had planted seeds of peace that would grow for generations. I only wanted to see you one last time, Dojin said softly, pulling Myray close. I never imagined I would get forever. Myray leaned against him, their daughter still on his shoulders, reaching up to catch the first twinkling stars. Forever is just the beginning, she replied. We have so much more to give this world. And there, in the gentle embrace of twilight, a family born of two worlds stood united against the darkness. They had proven that love could conquer fear, that hope could defeat despair, and that even the most impossible dreams could come true. The story of the condemned physician and his vampire wife spread across the land, passed from parent to child, from village to village. It became a legend of courage and compassion, a reminder that the heart sees no difference between kinds. And little Ariam, the miracle child, grew to become the first ambassador between humans and vampires, spending her long life building bridges where once there were only walls. But that is another story for another day.